Today I'm reacting to the story that broke yesterday all about Alexander Isak and the fact that he wants to leave Newcastle, even though Arsenal and Liverpool, the two teams who were most heavily linked with him, have already gone and brought their strikers this summer. This is Arsenal Unfiltered. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Arsenal Unfiltered, your 3 times a week dose of Arsenal coverage with me, your host Mark. Wherever you are in the world, I really hope you are well. As you heard at the top, I'm jumping on this afternoon. I don't usually do a Friday afternoon podcast, but I feel this piece of news really deserves one because Alexander Isak has been the topic of the summer, and it seemed like that topic was going to die away without a big resolution, a big money move. That seemed like it was just going away. But yesterday we had huge news. And I want to talk today about how I just think this has been a real merry-go-round, a really poor summer from not only a Newcastle point of view, but from an Alexander Isak point of view, and where it leaves the player now, and where it leaves Arsenal as well, and potentially title rivals Liverpool. We're going to go through it all. Just a quick note to say thank you so much for your support in the month of July. Really means a lot. And if you've enjoyed any episodes that you've listened to up until this point, please consider leaving a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast from and following the podcast. It really helps get the message out there and allows more Arsenal fans to hear Arsenal Unfiltered and tune into the podcast. So appreciate everyone's support. If you're new here, welcome. Really glad to have you. Let's get started then. So yesterday we get the news Alexander Isak is not on the Newcastle tour, and Newcastle say that's because he's got a minor thigh problem. Immediate alarm bells, right? Because if you've got a minor thigh problem, you'd probably still go on tour. We've got Jurrien Timber out in Singapore and Hong Kong. He's just come off a major ankle surgery. He's out there working with the team, working with the boys, and of course, progressing his rehabilitation on tour. Minor thigh injury you'd expect for Alexander Isak, a fit young guy. He doesn't need to stay at home. So immediate alarm bells, and then later in the day, we discover that this is actually not, well, it might be a minor thigh injury. I guess that's not been confirmed. But the main reason he is not on tour is because he has asked Newcastle that he wants to explore his options. And I think there's tons and tons of angles that we can examine this at. I mean, the first one that jumps out to me is what is Alexander Isak and his agent, I should probably say, what's his agent doing? Because last week, let's go back to the start of the summer. Arsenal really interested in the start of the summer. It is not a secret that Mikel Arteta's number one choice for that striking position would have been Alexander Isak. And I think Arsenal, having had a very lean year in the previous year in transfers in the summer and January, would have had the funds to go and get Alexander Isak. It would have been a huge transfer, 100%. And there's other bits of work that obviously we have done in the transfer market subsequently. But I think for Alexander Isak, Arsenal would have moved heaven and earth. Arsenal wouldn't have been the only club. Of course, Liverpool would have been another club looking for a striker who probably could have afforded? I mean, they definitely could have afforded Alexander Isak based on their spending so far. And Chris Weatherspoon from The Athletic, go and follow him. He does some wonderful financial stuff if you're interested in that side of the game. He's done an article this morning basically saying Arsenal and Liverpool might still be able to afford Isak. Like, it would be really difficult for both of them, but it's not out of the question as it is for a club like, let's say, Barcelona, who are just hamstrung with registration issues and financial problems. So, really interesting that actually, even still, there is a belief that Arsenal and Liverpool could go and get this player. So there's funds there, and there was definitely funds there at the start of the summer. The stance was Alexander Isak is going nowhere. And I just do not believe that Alexander Isak has changed his tune from the start of the summer to this point in the summer, because he will have known about the interest, etc. He will have known that there were clubs in for him. And they've basically allowed that narrative to go out that there is no way Alexander Isak is moving. Even for £150 million, I still think it was doubtful. I still think Newcastle would have fought it. That was just the price tag that they slapped on him, I think, to try and see everyone off. So Arsenal go out. We pursue Benjamin Sesko for a bit. we pursue Victor Gyökeres for a bit, we go through that malarkey, and it looks like Victor Gyökeres will be either doing his medical right now or over the weekend and flying out to meet the guys in Hong Kong for the second leg of the tour. So we've resolved our issue. Then Liverpool come in, they go, we'd be willing to do a deal around £120 million, very casually. Newcastle stand firm, no thank you, he is not for sale. Liverpool go and sign Hugo Ekitike, and all of a sudden, Alexander Isak is suddenly potentially exploring options. It's horrible handling from the agent and from Isak, because they really didn't get their narrative out. They did not get their narrative out before the market started to move and before things started to change. I don't believe Victor Gyökeres goes to Arsenal if Alexander Isak's available. Certainly he doesn't go to Arsenal at this point, because I think there would still have been a fight for Alexander Isak. I don't believe Hugo Ekitike goes to Liverpool at this point, because again, there would have been that fight for Alexander Isak, probably between those two clubs. Let's be honest, Chelsea may have been an option before they signed Liam Delap and João Pedro. I don't know if Alexander Isak would look at that current project and say, yeah, I want to be involved with that, with the kind of churn that they've got. Some players obviously do. Real Madrid, they've got Mbappe, difficult to break through there. Bayern Munich, they could sign Isak, but, I think he'd want to potentially stay in the Premier League for the money, for the wages. Bayern can afford that. Of course, we know they have that money, but I don't know, is the Premier League a more interesting prospect for a player like Alexander Isak, who's at the top of his game? I think probably it is, and of course Bayern Munich still have Harry Kane. They're still working with one of the best strikers in the world, so it's going to be difficult to break through there. And from there, you are looking at Arsenal and Liverpool. Manchester City have Haaland, so look, I come back to it. It's horrible handling. They should have got their intention to leave out way before any of this, because it would have been Arsenal and Liverpool battling it out for the Alexander Isak signature, but they have allowed Arsenal and Liverpool to believe that this transfer is not feasible, not doable in any way, shape or form, and therefore those two clubs, who would have been fantastic for Alexander Isak, let's make that point. This is an Arsenal podcast, but you can't deny that if he'd gone to Liverpool, he would have had an unbelievable career and probably won the very biggest of trophies. So I think it's horrible handling from Isak and his agent. I think it's horrible handling from Newcastle. If they had even a sniff that Alexander Isak was saying, yeah, I think I want out, they should have been at that negotiating table, one with the player, very early on, to really try and get him to sign that new contract. And I do believe that they are on that and they are looking at that. But they should have been also at the negotiating table with other clubs and saying, look, if we can't get him to sign a new contract, we want this for him. Now their hand is in a horrible scenario, because any club that comes in for him at this point in the window is saying, look, especially Arsenal and Liverpool, we've already done our business. Chelsea you could throw into this as well, who are another team that could potentially afford him. We've already done our business, so you played us long, you left us this late, and now we only have this. Do you want to have a player who doesn't want to play for you on your hands? Because this is what we're giving you. Newcastle potentially could have got out ahead of that, and I think dealt with it in a different way, and maybe said, we're not going to say he's for sale, but we're also not going to just turn away Arsenal and turn away Liverpool when they pitch up. We're going to have a discussion with them. Maybe we'll try and get 150, 160 million and get that offer on the table. And if we can't secure Alexander Isak's signature, we have a wonderful, wonderful deal on our hands. So it's horrible handling from that side. From an Arsenal and Liverpool side, I think it's difficult to criticise either of those clubs, because as well as it being an incredible difficult transfer to get through from a Newcastle side of things, and I guess getting it past Newcastle and getting them to agree with the ideas and potentially Alexander Isak moving, it's also financially an incredibly difficult deal to do. So you need a lot of time to do a deal of this size. We saw that with Declan Rice. That took a long time, a lot of work from Arsenal in the background. We got that done eventually, but Arsenal will have been looking and probably made initial inquiries in the early parts of this year. Say, look, we want him in the summer. What would it be like? And if Newcastle have been very, very stern, turned Arsenal away, turned Liverpool away as well, They have to turn their attention elsewhere. And I'm very confident that what we heard last week about Liverpool coming out and just, throwing that number out into the public was a final Hail Mary. And maybe they were hoping, maybe Liverpool were hoping that this disgruntlement from Alexander Isak would come a week earlier before they'd gone and finished up with Hugo Ekitike. Now, there is a huge transfer merry-go-round going on at the moment where it feels like there is a world where Arsenal could end up with their third choice striker whilst the first and second choice move. Even 48 hours ago, it looked like Arsenal were going to get Victor Gyökeres, and neither of their first or second choice striker targets were going to move at all. It looked like Isak was going to stay in his place and Sesko was going to stay at Leipzig. There is a world now where we start the season, and this is a horrible thought, where Liverpool have Alexander Isak, because they have managed to prize him out of there after his kind of statement about wanting to explore options. And there is a world where Newcastle go and get Sesko to replace him. So all four strikers that have been spoken about this summer, Ekitike, and I guess from an Arsenal point of view, I mean by that, Ekitike, Isak, Sesko and Gyökeres have all moved. And I think if we look at a scenario where all of them have moved and we have Gyökeres, and Liverpool have two of those strikers, we're probably not feeling great about it. But you've got to put it in the context. You've got to put it in the context of the timeline. I'm really hoping that Arsenal fans won't go out and go, we should have waited for Isak, we should have waited for Sesko, we should have gone the distance for Sesko, because I think all the context that's gone into this is really important. Now, obviously, I think every fan would say Isak's the first choice. Everyone wanted Isak. Then I actually had Sesko next in my choice, and then Gyökeres was my third choice, just as it felt like it was for Arsenal. I know some people differ on second and third choice there. Some people think it's Gyökeres, some people think it's Sesko, who is the best guy for us. But we are getting Gyökeres, that's the thing. What I really don't want to see is Arsenal fans thinking, wow, we've messed this up, because we had to go and move, we had to get someone in, and the scenario when we worked to get Gyökeres was Alexander Isak is not moving, Benjamin Sesko is not moving. So we've got to remember not to analyse it in the kind of final days of the transfer window without that context in there. I think another really important thing to remember for us is that we can't just go and leave the Gyökeres deal now. I've seen that idea float around on the internet, and I've seen it. I was listening to Tom Canton this morning on the Gooner Talk. Is it the Gooner Talk? I think it is. Oh, that's awful that I can't remember his show name. But either way, I was listening to Tom Canton, and someone was in the chat saying, basically, yeah, it is the Gooner Talk. Thank goodness I got that right. Someone was in the chat saying, let's pull out of the Gyökeres deal and go back in for Sesko. But no player would want to deal with Arsenal if we did that. If we got to the point where we dragged out this saga all the way to the end, unless you find a medical issue at this point, I don't think you can back out, because you would send a message to every player that you want to sign in the future of, yeah, we're going to chase you, but you know what, if something better comes along, we will just leave. And that is not a position that players want to be in. They don't want to be looking at, I'm going to Arsenal, but they might just bin me last minute. So there's absolutely no way we can pull out the Gyökeres deal now. I think that would be entirely the wrong message to players that we are looking to sign in the future, and an incredibly risky strategy as well, because there's no guarantee if we went back in and we went and got Isak and ditched the Gyökeres deal at the 11th hour, there's no guarantee that we actually get Isak. We'd be rolling the dice on that he doesn't go to Liverpool. In terms of could we have Isak and Gyökeres, I mean, I jokingly sort of posted Isak on the left, Gyökeres down the middle. Isak has played off the left, he's operated in those sides, on that side, but you don't buy a £150 million player and play him out of position, and I'm not sure Victor Gyökeres is a player who could play off the left. I don't think you buy two strikers in one summer and, have one of them not be the main guy, especially when he's coming in expecting to be the main guy. I just don't see it happening. Chris Weatherspoon, like I said, of The Athletic, says that it is technically still possible from a financial point of view, but a wonderful point was made on the Arsenal Vision podcast a couple of days ago, in that Gyökeres and an Eze or a Rodrigo or a left-sided player, Xavi Simons perhaps, is probably better than just Isak. I think that's probably the best call, and it makes a lot more sense for us to go and sign one of those players, whether it's a winger or a wing fielder, to fill that gap and make sure that that is one of the major improvements we make this summer. And if we do that, that will be really late in the summer. It feels like someone will need to go for that to happen, because we don't have any sniffs of Arsenal approaching for any players or making approaches to clubs. So it does feel like someone is going to have to go. So all of that to say, this is an absolutely wild scenario we find ourselves in. The market has moved on. The market has developed away from Alexander Isak. And now he comes back into it with this late play. As I sit here, it's the 25th of July. So it is a fairly late play. There's only just over a month left of transfer window time. To get that sort of deal done in that time period, I don't think he moves. I still don't think he moves, and I think Newcastle have played an awful hand. Well, all those parties have played an awful hand, because they will end up potentially with a player who doesn't want to be there, who is a little bit resentful that he wasn't allowed to talk to Liverpool. He wasn't allowed to talk to Arsenal. A player who has all the talent in the world, but when players get disgruntled, that can really affect their performances. The agent didn't get that message out there clear enough, so handled incredibly poorly. It will be, probably, my guess, is a scenario where Alexander Isak will still be playing for Newcastle come the 1st of September, and he will move next summer. Now, will Arsenal go back in for him next summer? I don't know. I did a pod a little while back where I said, if he gets into the final year of his contract, Arsenal, I'm sure, will be back in for him then. But I don't know if you sign Gyökeres one summer and Isak the next summer. That is very, very tight. I just can't see any club managing to get this over the line in the final 5 weeks of the window. So, yeah, it's a bit of a rambly one today, guys, but I had to jump on and react because I feel like this is an absolutely wild story. It feels mismanaged from both Newcastle and Isak and his agent. It feels like Arsenal and Liverpool are kind of now, I don't want to say holding all the cards, right? But they will be sitting there thinking, we're not paying £150 million for this player anymore. He will go probably to next summer, another year off his contract. They know he wants to leave. They know he wants to come to one of those big clubs. There may be other clubs he's looking at, but just using those two as the example at this point. I think they will be looking at this scenario with Alexander Isak and thinking, we've got a chance next year. We've got a chance maybe even in January. That would be very unlikely. Big transfers don't happen in January, but if the work starts now, you just don't know. It will depend whether Newcastle do well in Europe and how they get on there and where they're at in the cups and stuff like that as well. So there's so many moving parts now. And of course, Benjamin Sesko will be looking at this with a very, very keen eye as well, wondering, will he be at Newcastle next summer? Will he be at Newcastle as their new striker hope? Let's see. But to summarise, guys, very strange management from Newcastle and Isak and his agent. Arsenal, Liverpool, really holding a lot of the cards now. Yes, they've already got their players, I should say, in, but there is a real chance for next summer or the summer after that they go in and can get this player cheaper than they thought they were going to get him. And it's a really, really strange scenario, and one that I'm so fascinated to see the resolution of. I'm going to leave it there for now, guys. Just wanted to jump on and discuss a completely mad story. If you've enjoyed this episode of Arsenal Unfiltered, or you've enjoyed any episode of Arsenal Unfiltered, like I said at the start, follow and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts from. Really, really does help. Find me on Blue Sky, Arsenal-Unfiltered at bsky.social. Reach out, chat. I'm really happy to chat in DMs or talk to anyone on there. And of course, if you enjoy the YouTube content, find us on there. Like and subscribe to any of our videos. Trying to bring more and more of the video stuff, but it is difficult, so bear with me. All that's left to say is thank you for following, thank you for listening, and I will speak to you very, very soon.